You know what else is great to see? What Joe Biden is doing in the agricultural sector through the Inflation Reduction Act subsidies.
You tell him.
Yeah, damn right. The Biden dick riding continues, people. So we got a headline from Politico. Farmers have bought into Biden's climate program. What is Biden's climate program having to do with farmers? What is the connection here? Well, Biden officials have pumped $3 billion into subsidies for farmers for them to plant sequestration. What is it called? Yeah, carbon sequestration crops. And these sequestration. Yes.
Really?
Paragraph 3.
Sequestration.
Oh man, I wish we cut that out. Sequestration. What did I say?
Sequestration.
Oh.
And then you said it again, and I'm like, no.
No. Okay.
Okay.
So can you say it again?
Sequestration.
Thanks. So the carbon sequestration, I can't say it.
You have to.
Okay, those plants.
Yeah. In the dirt.
In the dirt, those things that you put in the ground, they are designed to suck carbon out of the atmosphere. And during off seasons, Biden wants to pay farmers to plant these crops and to suck carbon in from the atmosphere. And there are some estimates. What?
Well, I just want to be clear. This isn't the only thing that's being subsidized. This is an example of some kind of agricultural R&D that is what is in general being rewarded and incentivized here with this $3 billion.
Yes. This is not all of it. But I think this is the good example because we always talk about carrot versus stick. Yeah. Right? That's your big thing. You always talk about carrot versus stick. Are we going to beat them into them doing what we want, or are we going to benefit them for going the right direction? And during Biden's presidency, they chose the stick.
During Obama's presidency.
Yes.
You said during Biden's presidency.
Oh my God. Okay.
This is going to be great.
This is going to be a funny one, guys.
Yeah.
So during Obama's presidency, he used cap and trade approach. And cap and trade approach limited what farmers could do. And then if they went over a certain thing, then they were taxed and penalized for it. Mm-hmm. The farmers hated that and naturally punished Obama at the ballot box for it.
Yeah.
And we're mad at him.
It makes so much sense. Like just thinking on a human psychological level, we talked about the global food industry 2 weeks ago. And you talked about how these farmers are often some of the poorest people around, right? And they're the ones growing our food. Like they are sustaining the population. So to get the stick, even though you've been doing this thing that is what allows people to live, of course you're going to get upset about that.
Yeah.
And to instead be rewarded and kind of led towards a more productive direction, everyone's on board with it.
They're kind of like they're buying in the farmers. They're saying, we know that you're struggling and this is going to be the new path forward and you're going to be in on the green revolution.
Yes.
Right. And so what scientists are estimating, I shouldn't say scientists, the USDA is estimating that it could be the equivalent of taking 12 million cars off the road using these sequestration plants.
There it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what these things do, they plant them during the off season, sucks in carbon, then they harvest them all out, and then they plant in their corn crops or their soybeans or whatever they're actually farming. But there are issues from this. Stanford University Center of Food Security and the Environment, because we're big on the food security, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. They found that these cover crops, specifically when implemented poorly, can reduce overall crop productivity.
Yeah.
That reduction in crop growth can cause spillover emissions in other areas of the world where farmers would have to ramp up their own agricultural production. Mm. So that's an example of, the soil being too overutilized throughout the year. Yeah. And that's causing the actual crop of the food we eat to may get weaker if we use these cover crops.
So worries about sequestration, whether it will actually cause more farming and more emissions around the world. I'm completely okay with this because these are the gambles that we now have to take in the battle against climate change.
Totally.
Right? Things could go worse, but we need to incentivize the research and development. I think somewhere in the article, in this Politico article, a member from the Biden administration's agricultural department specifically says this is basically going to be a big science experiment.
Mm-hmm.
We need more of those.
We need more science experiments.
Big science experiments, because we need to figure out what the most effective ways to reduce our emissions in all of these different areas, including agriculture, is going to be. So I'm hugely on board with this.
No, listen, we are now at the point of no return. We need to start figuring this out.
Yeah.
And the Biden administration is taking some more steps on climate change. I didn't put this in our list here, but I just remembered, I read an article earlier today. I can't find it now, but we were talking last week about Operation Warp Speed with the vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about the fixing of I-95 in Pennsylvania. And we were talking about how when the government wants to do something, it does it. And we just need to organize the political will to get it done. Well, the Biden administration is doing its own Operation Warp Speed type thing for carbon removal from the atmosphere. As of a couple days ago, they are opening up a whole new realm of investment and portion of the government dedicated to try to remove carbon from the atmosphere.
Really?
Yes. And we are now at that point where we need to start not just transitioning our economy, but we need to undo the damage we've done. And we need to start sucking in as much carbon as possible out of the atmosphere. And the government needs to be 1,000% involved.
Yeah, I have looked into carbon removal a little bit in recent months, and what I saw is that there's relatively very little funding. I thought it was only like maybe a few hundred million in the budget, but maybe I'm wrong.
No. They I hope I can find it, but
basically, yeah. So there are technologies that are already out there that can remove carbon from our atmosphere. I think a project that I was reading about, one of the biggest ones, was removing 60 pounds over the course of a month, or it might have been 60 tons over the course of a month, which again was the equivalent of some 100,000 cars on the road for that amount of time or something, which really is not even a dent. It is barely a drop in the bucket. But the way that you scale these things up is by pouring a ton of money into them.
Yeah.
Right? Economies of scale. So I'm on board with more funding for that as well.
He needs to prove I think he wants to prove that it's going to work on a small scale and then up it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
He wants to prove that it's possible and that companies will actually do it.
Yeah.
Right. That's his game.
It's also tough because this is one of those things that's going to have to be entirely government funded. They're going to be the only customer for these companies. And so if climate change continues to be a politicized issue and companies can't trust that funding is going to be consistent,
they're not going to invest in that infrastructure.
Exactly.
I think this is when the socialist in me truly comes out. And it's like, we need a department of the government, like a section of the EPA that is in the business of sucking carbon out of the atmosphere. And that's their job.
Yeah.
We need to hire how many people we need to hire. And then their job is to suck carbon out of the atmosphere. And they get paid good salaries. And then all they do all day is hire contractors and do this nonstop to suck carbon out of the atmosphere.
Yeah.
That needs to be a department of our government.
I'm not opposed.
What kills me is I never used to be for that because I didn't want to bake in the fact that we could keep using fossil fuels. You know, because I don't want us to think. It's almost like when you have like massive credit card debt and you have like 3 different credit cards, and they're all at like 20% interest rates, and then you consolidate all of that into like one personal loan of 10%.
Sure.
And you're like, oh, I consolidated my debt. My interest rate went down. I don't got to worry about my debt anymore. I don't want that to happen with carbon emission.
Sure, I get that, but the problem is there's already too much carbon in the atmosphere.
Like there's no going back. Like we need to.
And like where we've set our goals for, which oftentimes are around 2050 to be carbon neutral or zero carbon, we're going to emit so much carbon until then. Like even though we're trying to ramp down, we're going to blow past 1.5 degrees warming, maybe get towards 2 degrees. So we need to,
God forbid, 2.5.
Yeah, we need to not only try to flatten that out, but try to bring it down if we can.
We have to bring it down if we can.